I still disagree. I still think that the Diaz trade, who would have thought that Diaz would be sitting here in 2019 with a high 4 ERA?
I thought he was going to be in the middle of the league. I'll give you that. I thought he was at this point going to have a much lower ERA with higher saves.
I thought he wasn't going to quite be what he was last year, but I thought he'd have a sub-3 ERA at least. Sub-3 is not that bad for a dominant relief pitcher.
Yes, but he...
All right, so yeah, I do want to bring up one more team. It's a team with a lot of young talent that should get rid of it because they ain't going anywhere. And I'm sorry that I have to do this, Joe. It's the Mets. It's the Mets. They gotta basically get rid of everyone except McNeil and Alonso.
So you would even try to move DeGrom at this point?
Well, it's not a matter of try to move DeGrom.
Right.
DeGrom's not going anywhere.
I don't think he is either.
He's untradeable.
I don't think he is either.
He's untradeable, even if the Mets were going to try to. I think that the Mets will, at the very least, hang on to him until his current contract is up. We'll see what happens when the extension kicks in, but he's gonna be practically untradeable.
Well, and it's frustrating listening to Mets fans too because they talk about all the players they don't want to trade, and then they name half the team.
Right. So what do you want? You know something?
You're not getting rid of just Ramos. You're not getting rid of just the random relief pitcher.
Did I want to see Chapman and Miller go?
No, absolutely not. I don't think any one of us did.
But you know what? It's all for the best.
Yeah.
So
we made that decision knowing what we were going to have this season.
Yeah.
And those are the type of moves that teams like Kansas City and the Mets need to make right now.
You don't get to go on
They waited too long. They should have done it last year.
You don't get to go on a quest of rebuilding your team and then say, "No, but I really like that one."
Yeah.
You don't get to do that. So, Syndergaard, ship him off. Send him to the Yankees. I think they deserve him.
I think he could go to Houston, and that's what I'm worried about.
That's not allowed.
That's what I'm worried about.
Well, in that case, the Mets should not sell. Don't sell. Keep your players.
I agree with that, but I think that Houston has some of the scariest prospects and other pieces that they can move. The fact that they have Brantley, who is having an amazing season, as we talked about last week, gives them leverage to move someone like Tucker because they brought up Jovan Jordan, who he broke records. He's the fastest rookie to 35-plus home runs, and I think he has like 16 home runs. That's unheard of. Mm-hmm. And they think that Tucker has the potential to do that. If they traded Tucker to the Mets, they're getting Syndergaard.
Well, yeah, that's unfortunate because I was going to say Syndergaard. I mean, his stuff is very much obviously still there. He might just be one of those change of scenery guys that suddenly does better.
But
kind of like that other guy that the Mets traded recently, that Darno guy. You remember we talked about him?
Yeah, he's about to win MVP. He goes from 0 home runs to 10 in the matter of a week
fine.
or two.
As long as the Rays don't make the playoffs, I'm okay with it. Wheeler.
Wheeler's another.
Wheeler.
I think they're definitely move Wheeler.
Here's one that Mets fans will want my head on a pike for.
Yeah.
Conforto. Move him. Listen, he's getting to be in his late 20s.
He has the value. He is a great player for the team. The fans love him. I like Conforto, but you gotta move him.
I think he's not at that point anymore where you're wondering what he is. So here's what he is. When healthy, awesome player.
If he has any potential left, I think it's very small. I don't think he's gonna turn into like a Judge or a
right.
JD.
And you know he's a good player. If the Mets were a good team or maybe a piece or two away or maybe like just kind of mediocre, I would say, yeah, hang on to him. You could turn it around.
I think the reason a lot of fans are apprehensive about doing so is that a lot of the times when they get rid of these players who they believed were going to be their next star-studded player, he turns into something, maybe not that, but something significant on another team. You saw it with Daniel Murphy. Right. You saw it with Turner.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
It is I would be very, very annoying.
I'm
annoyed for Mets fans.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Because you see the Yankees do the opposite, and get players like Hicks and Didi and Voit, and they all pay off. Well, why doesn't that work for the Mets? Because of the front office.
It's the front office, they bad scouting, bad analytics.
I mean, you could go around the league and you could look at which teams have a good front office and which teams have a bad front office. And it's sad the Mets, unfortunately, have a bad one.
I got one more. This last one. The Mets already have a discount on this player, and whatever amount of money is left, they would still have to eat a gigantic portion of that. Maybe you can move Robinson Cano if you can get his salary down to like $1 million a year.
Robinson Cano, for the first time in his career, just hit 3 home runs in one game, and it meant absolutely nothing. He has 9 on the season.
Travis d'Arnaud beat him there.
Yeah. Travis d'Arnaud has more home runs than Cano. That's not okay.
He beat Cano to his first 3 home run game.
Like, this is a player who could have been a future Hall of Famer and did everything wrong.
So Evan and I kind of have a disagreement on this trade. I think that the Cano trade wasn't really the Cano trade. It was the Diaz trade. I think that it was a good move for the Mets at the time because it was the right move to make. I thought that taking on the contract, or at least the little fraction of the contract of Cano, to get Edwin Diaz, and you didn't really have to give up that much in prospects, although McNeil was almost one of those prospects, which that makes me laugh. He wasn't, thank God. You know, you take on a small fraction of the contract, you get Edwin Diaz, a couple of things happened that nobody really predicted. Nobody predicted that Cano would absolutely just crater the way
I don't
he
think
has.
that's true because I predicted that. I honestly thought that this was one of the dumbest trades I've ever seen in the history of trades.
You thought that Cano was just going to crater?
I didn't think he was going to hit 15 home runs, dude.
All right, why?
I didn't think he was going to get 70 RBIs.
Okay, RBIs don't matter, first of all.
Okay, but my point is I didn't think he was going to put enough production in to help this team because they were trying to get a closer.
And what reason did you have to think that Cano would suddenly lose his power?
Because he went from on steroids to off steroids
So
to
what?
trying to rejuvenate his career again.
So what? Ryan Braun went from on steroids to off steroids. Sure, he was never
And
a 40 home run guy again, but he can still hit over 15 of them.
And who talks about him?
Nobody, but that's because he's not he's not an MVP candidate anymore.
And he's never going to be.
Right, but
neither is Cano.
But he hasn't tanked. He hasn't cratered. He
hasn't helped them. They have Yelich. They have
Okay, but he's still a solid player.
They have Kane. They have
He can still hit like 20 home runs.
Okay, but it doesn't mean much according to the rest of the team around him. My point is when he made that trade, I thought that they could have gotten value in a closer from doing another move. There were plenty of other options out there that they could have made. Instead, they decided to bring in someone with a ridiculous contract who they're now going to have to deal with for the next 4 years, and someone who isn't even a second baseman anymore. He plays first, too.
Well, look, I will agree with you that there were better options that the Mets could have gone with. Instead of throwing all of that money to Familia, they could have signed Ottavino, they could have signed Britton, they could have signed one of those other guys.
Anyone.
I think it would have been better. I still disagree. I still think that the Diaz trade, who would have thought that Diaz would be sitting here in 2019 with a high 4 ERA?
I thought he was going to be in the middle of the league. I'll give you that. I thought he was at this point going to have a much lower ERA with higher saves.
I thought he wasn't going to quite be what he was last year, but I thought he'd have a sub-3 ERA at least. Sub-3 is not that bad for a dominant relief pitcher.
Yes, but he also went from a team who had power bats, who put in a lot of offense, to a team that pretty much does nothing from game to game.
Wait, no, I'm talking about Diaz.
Yeah, Diaz.
What does the offense have to do with his ERA?
Well, he came from Seattle, so they actually gave him a lead going into that final inning.
I'm not talking about saves because saves are one of those stats that really are kind of bullshit. They don't really, like you just said.
No, I get
depends
that.
on what team you're on, right? I'm talking about his ability to strike guys out.
You don't think that if Diaz was traded to the Yankees, he would have more success this year, or traded to Houston?
Well, probably, but not because of the offense.
I think it certainly helps. You need people to score you runs.
Yeah, but he's not a starting pitcher. He's a relief pitcher. He comes in the last inning of the game.
Okay.
So if he doesn't have a lead, he just doesn't enter the game. It doesn't mean he comes in and pitches badly.
And how often do the Mets get him that lead to even do anything? And when he does, he goes in and he screws it up.
Well, that's
because
the
he has
problem.
nothing
That's the
around
problem.
him.
It's not the lack of opportunity for him to come into the game. The problem is he comes into the game.
Have you
and he
looked? Have you
sucks.
looked into his stuff? Is his stuff down? Is his fastball down?
You know what? I haven't looked at his velocity. He is
Because
not.
there's a reason that ERA is peaking.
He is just. I think he's just missing his spots. I think he's just. He's given up a lot of home runs.
Right.
He's given up
More so than we've ever seen.
way more home runs than he did last year. I mean,
Right.
by far. So that's a big problem. I think he's just serving up meatballs. I don't think he's really, I don't know if it's a control thing. I don't know if he's walking more guys. I don't have that data in front of me. The bottom line is this. Obviously, you and I are going to disagree about the Cano part. I thought that Cano was going to have an okay season, so on the discount, he would have been worth whatever that discount rate was. And then I thought that Diaz was going to be, like I said, not as dominant with Seattle as he was with Seattle, but at least, like I said, a sub-3 ERA. Something pretty good.
I guess I just have a thing against closers because I've constantly seen closers go from being the greatest to being nothing like that. We saw it with Gagne. We saw it with Francisco Rodriguez.
See it,
and I thought we were going to see it with Diaz. And we are.
You see it with guys who have a lot of pitches on their arm, a lot of
But
innings.
Diaz doesn't. So what is going on with that?
That's exactly the reason why I didn't think this was going to happen.
Right.
What has happened? Who knows? I don't know. I will say this. He pitched a lot of innings last year.
Okay.
This could all be fatigue. He pitched like 80-something innings last year.
Okay, so the Mets traded to Seattle Jay Bruce and who else? Swarzak and...
Yeah, it was Jay Bruce, it was Swarzak, and it was, I don't know, if only we had a Mets fan here that could help us out with that last name. Who knows?
Joe doesn't even know either. Okay. So that's my point, is it was just a weird trade for
my point is that they didn't give up much.
Correct.
There you go.
I mean, they weren't going to keep Bruce, and they didn't need Swarzak.
Now, how about some teams who gave up a lot, didn't know they were giving up a lot at the time, but really got nothing back in return?
Yeah,
So,
it happens to Arizona all the time. It happens to Detroit all the
It happens to
time.
Detroit all the time. Yeah, Arizona and Detroit. It happens to Seattle a lot.
Yep, it happens to Seattle
To the point where you got to wonder if why is Seattle still trading
the
with
teams that it never happens to, as far as Yankees go, are Mets and Pirates because they just want to fleece us all the time. So we just go, okay, peace, you're going to suffer. And they do.
So let's talk about some trades that at the time you didn't really know what was going to happen.
Right.
It was one of those, okay, why is this deal happening right now?
Correct.
But clearly one team had the finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can start off with a pretty recent one with the Pirates getting Archer.
Yeah.
And obviously they gave up Glasnow in order to get him. And now this dude is great. Sub-3 ERA. He's striking out like 10 or 11 guys per 9 innings. He's been awesome. He's been really good. And for a Rays team, Snell is not doing nearly as well as he did last year. They really needed someone to come in and step up.
Yeah. And it's interesting with the Rays, too, because they're very good at selling that pitcher high. They did so with Shields. They do so with Price, right? And I think I'm forgetting a couple. But they do it a lot.
Yeah.
And I've never liked Archer. I've always had concerns about Archer, and you're seeing a lot
Yeah,
of those concerns.
Archer had a solid season or two early in his career, but he really hasn't. He reminds me, honestly, a lot of Sonny Gray, where he came in, he was pretty dominant. He was one of those guys who's like, oh, here's the new big pitcher in baseball.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, all right, you just kind of have mental issues and you can't really throw the
Michael
ball.
Pineda.
Oh, boy. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about another one. This one actually kind of makes me laugh. So,
Okay.
Speaking of Rays, actually, they used to have a pretty good pitcher who they would call him Big Game James. Remember Big Game James?
Okay, yeah.
I remember there was one game, Yankees-Rays. It was Shields versus Sabathia. It ended up being a 1-0 game. Mm-hmm. Do you know how that one run scored in favor for the Yankees?
A walk or something dumb.
I think it was Brett Gardner on third base. Shields tries to pick him off.
And Brett's still home.
No, he threw the ball away. That was how that one run scored in that game. I think both pitchers had double-digit strikeouts.
That's unbelievable.
There's a thing called game score, so it's 1 to 100, which
right.
measures how good the pitching was in total.
Right.
That game won that year in terms of it had the highest game score all year long from the pitchers. I think it was up in the 90s.
Right.
The reason why I bring up Shields, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but man, Tatis Jr., they got him back from the White Sox in order to pretty much dump the corpse of James Shields on them.
Yeah, and it's sad for the White Sox, too, because they constantly make all these huge moves where they bring in, players who they think are going to work out, and they don't.
Yeah, and I mean, imagine if they still had Tatis along with some of these other young guys who are coming up right now. They'd be sitting really
mean, if Sale was still their ace...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They had to make that move as well, and I hope Moncada turns into something. But we're getting to the time where he needs to.
Yeah, well, he's like 25 now. A couple of quick ones: the R.A. Dickey trade, which at the time for the Mets was the Travis d'Arnaud trade, quickly turned
but
into
it got them Syndergaard.
Noah Syndergaard trade. And then one for the Yankees, who seem to do this all the time. Whoever would have thought that John Ryan Murphy would become Aaron Hicks?
And John Ryan Murphy has done two things for the Yankees. Do you know what they are? Got us Hicks. He did something else this year in April.
For the Yankees?
Yeah. Well, technically.
What, did he beat one of the rivals or something? Like a walk-off or something?
John Ryan Murphy was batting for Arizona, and CC Sabathia got his 3,000th strikeout against John Ryan Murphy.
You know what? I don't think... I might have been in Ohio when that happened earlier this year.
I've never laughed so hard. He just constantly gives and gives and gives to us. Thank you, John Ryan Murphy. I had like 17 posts about him on Twitter yesterday. It was great.
That's hilarious, man. I think that's all we got.
I think we're good to go.
I think that's all we got. Thank you for watching us. It's been awesome.
This is 27 Down, the perfect podcast for the perfect game. Thanks, guys. Take care.